Fortunately, there's been plenty of interruptions and I was not able to finish this code because something occurred to me, and this code does not just write itself. You know what I mean? If I'm going to finish this code, then I'm going to want it to be the right way of doing stuff. We've already got a couple of collections, and here I am making another one for the kintips. Kintip on a guardianship, fosterage, birth, or adoption is father and mother. Kintip on a marriage is the partner. Occupation is none. Residence, none, etc. Offspring, the kintip is going to be the name and ID of the child. So these are going to be name and IDs. And it's only for this column. I want to try to be a little bit objective. If I can think of two ways of doing it, I kind of think maybe I should do it the better of the two ways. So if you go in here, we've got these two collections that already have this information in them. We've got the event ID, which is the key in this dictionary, the main key. One of the keys in the inner dictionary is that event type. Over here in self.cellpool, which is a list of lists, we have that very same event ID, and paired with it inside these inner lists is a third list, another inner list, an innermost list, which is a list of widgets. So there's 8 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 columns, and this is the event ID. So this is one event. This is another event or attribute. And here are the 8 widgets for that row. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So all this is to be kept in the back of my mind while I try to prevent myself from going down a blind alley and creating a whole nother collection so that I can redo what's already been done plus add a little bit more. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to go in here and get a little here and get a little there, and it's all willy-nilly and disorganized. It's kind of spaghetti code that way, but there's people working on the house. There's lots of noise in case you hadn't noticed. So I haven't been able to record, and when I can't record, I can't write code because I am only doing this spontaneously and then chopping out the parts you don't want to hear where I'm going, like that, scratching my head. I don't want to write code without the microphone on, and that way we're going to have a kind of a documentation of creating a Geneaware. And I'm not a programmer, so I feel like it's a kind of a unique contribution to be able to show that. So I'm only writing code with the microphone on. So here's what I'm thinking. These widgets are instances of the cell or cell autofill class. You tab in and you start typing. Okay, we've done that. That part works. Why don't we, instead of making a general list that every widget has to go look itself up in, why don't we have the kintip code contained in the cell class? I think that's smarter, instead of trying to go hither and thither and compile a bunch of stuff into another dictionary when I've already got a big dictionary here for events data, nested dictionary, and a big nested list for the widgets, both of which use the event ID, which refers basically to this row, as kind of a key to that row. We have access to that event ID while we're making these widgets. While we're making these 5 cells, why don't we record that event ID in that class and make event ID an attribute of that class? And while we're at it, why don't we make a whole dictionary that will exist in each instance of this class, and when you change something, like type something into here or add an apostrophe over here where it's supposed to have an apostrophe, well, why don't you just save that information in a dictionary for that cell only? That seems like a much cleaner and simpler way to do it, and the data involved with this cell is inherent to that cell. The cell instance is self-contained. So I'm not going to go over here and delete this, but I am not going to run it because I think we're going to do something different. So I'm just going to stop doing that for now and just ignore that. I'm even going to put it at the bottom so I don't have to look at it. We'll put it there for now. So let's go find that cell And then the cell autofill inherits from cell. So if we put it in here, then it'll automatically exist in cell autofill also. Nice little class. You could use a little more meat to it, don't you think? Since it's wanting to have a tooltip appear, well, let's have a tooltip. Thing about it is, I suppose they're not working right now, but we've got nametips also. So if you point at a name, you're going to see, well, is it a birth name? You're going to see the person's ID number. So we're going to have a tip. You'll be able to use it not only here, you'll be able to use it here for name tips, or you use it here for name tips, whatever you want. Wherever we have that cell widget, it will become available and you can use it in different ways. Say, for example, here, we were wanting to save left ID, left name, right ID, right, and that's for mother and father, and then for spouse and child. We want to save all these so we could have a dictionary inside of this class. Remember these 8 things plus the event ID, that's 9 things. So let's put that dictionary in here. A dictionary, not a function. We can put a function too if we want, and I'm sure we will, but I don't know what yet. Let's put some stuff in that dictionary. And so far, this doesn't look like a nested dictionary. I don't think it's going to be, which is kind of nice in a way. It's a little bit easier to deal with. Those can be left empty. They can just stay none if they're not needed. For one kintip, we're going to have the parent only. For another one, we're going to have only the spouse. So the ones that stay none, that doesn't hurt nothing. We'll just leave them that way. And these are going to be a child only. But that's only for when we're doing kintips. Now, we're going to go up here and have a name type. Say one guy has a birth name, but this is her stage name, or this is her pseudonym, AKA. We want to know, if it's not a birth name, we want to know that. Married name, whatever. So we're going to have the person's ID and their name type. That's a name tip. We can do that too. All we got to do is put names in here. Name type. And we're also going to want event type. This is a dictionary. This stuff can be in any order. Let's have a subject ID. This is for name tip, which we'll do later. All right, and then we can always add more. Right now we're just going to use these. And this one. So we point at birth and we get father and mother. We're going to leave that in place for now, but that might be replaced. That's not an event type though, that's a kin type. What if we wanted to put it in here? We'd put kin type. Seems like we're spending a lot of time on kintips, but this is the part that I have always had to kind of try and force into the code later on, retrofit, you know. And so I think it's probably a good idea that we just go ahead and finish this part of the feature before doing the rest. The rest is we got to be able to put a apostrophe in here, tab out, and have that change go directly into the database. That's how this is going to work. And this worked before. It used to work, but I changed it. Now I'm changing it back, but it's going to be better than before because I'm, gaining wisdom with every time I go down a blind alley and write code that has to be replaced. Hopefully I'm learning a little bit. So you tab in, you make a change. Tab in, you make a change. Tab in, you make a change. Click in, you make a change. Click in, make a change. Instead of reading fosterage and turning that into mother and father, we could store mother and father in the instance dictionary for this cell so that it's already there. We don't have to go figure it out. Okay, so we're going to probably do away with this wonderful code that does this wonderful thing that's very clever, but I don't think it's necessary, and I think I want to be symmetrical. We're going to get everything for our tips out of one source instead of going hither and thither, getting all confused and writing code that no one's going to want to work on in the future. And now that we have something called self.tip, which is a dictionary in cell, while we're creating the cells and we have our values, we have access to the values while we're creating the cells, right? Well, that's when we put them in the dictionary. Here's where we start making table cells. There's what I call a table of contents method, which says, first we do this, then we do this, then we do this, then we do this. So if you ever wonder what order we do things in, you just come here and just boom, boom, boom. It's just like that. So the first thing we do is we make table cells, which returns the table rows, which is a list, and then we set cell content using table rows as an argument, and then we show the table cells. And then while we're doing these three things, we want to be putting the necessary values such as event ID into the cell attribute self.tip. So let's look. Where is event ID? Let's put that in first. There's your cell. That's when we first create the cell. The instance here in this method is called cell. Cell.event. I don't know if that's still needed. It doesn't matter how many times you start over. What matters is that eventually you get it working well with code that's fairly easy to read and understand, so that someone else could fix it if I'm not around anymore. So either one of these collections has the event ID in it. Which one are we using first? Control F. And this is the first occurrence of self.events data. We're getting this data out of the database right here. What about cell pool? I want to know which one comes first, because wherever we get our information first, then that's where we should try and save this event ID right here. See, it's in both. It's used kind of like as a key also in this nested list. Control F. Self.cellPool is made later on in the next method. So we're starting off creating self.events data and some other stuff from the database right here. We're looping over self.events data. And I think I'm doing something unnecessary here. Self.events data is a dictionary, and I'm counting the things that are in it and looping over something that is that length. I'm pretty sure that is more complicated than it needs to be. Let's get rid of this. In Python, you can just loop over it. So when you loop over self.events data, which is a dictionary, event ID is the key. When you loop over it this way, it's the same thing as going like that. So I is a key. I is event ID. So I don't like using single letter variables. I can't see them good because look, that is an event ID. If J equals 0, J are the columns. Okay, let's get rid of J while we're at it in the selection. We got rid of I and J, so we can read this code now. Cell equals an instance of the class cell. Cell.tip event ID equals event ID. Now, isn't that easier than messing around trying to get this information from over there and that information from over there and blah, blah, blah? We already had that information. Let's put it in the cell itself. Okay? Cells in their body, you know, they carry their own information, don't they? I think they do. Isn't that what DNA is? I don't know. I don't know about science. Me and science don't get along. I prefer superstition for the most part, but that's just me. What else do we need? We need a left person and a right person, if it's of a certain event type. A birth, fosterage, guardianship, or adoption, we need a left person or right person. Divorce, marriage, etc., we need a partner. Offspring, we need a child. So let's put this right here. That'll be local inside of this method. Okay, in order to use event to kin, we have to know the event type. It's going to be one of these, or a couple event type, or the word offspring. We need to go to the place where we put these words into those cells. So this is probably not the right place to do that. We're just now making these. We want to go to where we already have access to the data and slip it in right there. Is it set self content? I would think so. But just to double check before I read all that code, let's see what are we actually doing in show table cells. Here's where we're inserting text. This is where we want to do something, because the text here is going to equal that event type in column 0. So this is going to go in here someplace. This is not the right place yet, but could put it here. Oh heck, let's move it now. Let's put it right here. Here is where we're configuring text. In 0 through 4, that's the first 5 columns. We're doing an insert into a cell, and this is what we're inserting. So if C, that's column, equals 0, I want to get rid of the C. The word column here is not a problem. That's a Tkinter option. Place all in the selection only. Now we got column equals column. Nothing wrong with that. This is a Tkinter option. It's a key in a dictionary somewhere inside Tkinter. This is a variable. They're two different things, so you don't have to invent so many names. If column equals 0, because that's the only one that's going to have kintips. Now we're in here. Event to kin. These are event types. This tuple is a key, and this is a value. If event type is in the key, then we're going to use this value. We're going to save it in our new handy-dandy self-contained attribute, self.tip. Now we have to loop over that tiny little dictionary. We're looping over both the keys and the values, so we've got to say items. If whatever is in the key, then we're going to do something here, and then we're going to break out of the loop. We're only looking for one thing, because we're talking about one widget here. Okay, for row and then for cell. So we're inside this loop, talking about one cell. We're looping through cell pool. The innermost list of cell pool is just these widgets here. And we're only talking about this one, column 0. We're making cells here, remember? We're going into where we're making the table and we're using the values as they come up, where they already exist, so we don't have to go find them somewhere. This is the text. If the text is offspring, the tip event type equals V. Say the text is offspring, the text is in this tuple, which is the key, then the value is child. And that is going to appear in the kintip. We've already got the event ID and the kin type, part of the text for the kintip. Moving right along now, this is much easier, plus it's self-contained in the widget class that we're dealing with. This would be a little bit better if this was, can't say tuple, but we can. And this was something like that. That's very deeply indented, but it's super simple. This is a simple dictionary. It's not a problem. What else do we need in our cell? Self.tip attribute. Got this? Oh, wait, we got to actually put that in here, don't we? That's kin type. Ah, I see what we have to do. Okay. In here we called it widge. This is going to be widge.tip, and then the key is kin type. Okay, now we've got two things. We've got this and we've got this. But then if it's in one tuple, we want to save this stuff. If it's in another tuple, we want to save this stuff. And if it's in the third tuple, we want to save this stuff. And then we're done. That's all there is to do. This is not hard. I was making it hard before, which is why I'll be deleting like about 2 hours worth of recording. So at this point, the only thing we're going to get is person IDs and person names. But we don't get the names directly from the database because TreeBart has a special method for getting the right name because someone might have 2 or more names. And we want to get the birth name. And if not the birth name, we follow a certain hierarchy, get the best name we can according to a hierarchy that's built into the database. So for example, if on that hierarchy stage name is below AKA and he has both, then we want to get AKA instead of the stage name, assuming that there's no birth name. So all we really want to get at this point is the person ID. Well, we might have to go to the database for that. But first off, we've got to do what we already know how to do, and then we'll figure out the part we don't know how to do. But start off by doing what we do know how to do, which is to decide which of these 3 groups that word is actually in. Is it a birth-like event? Is it a couple event? Or is it an offspring event? Over here in self.events data, which is not what we're looping through anymore. However, we could go back here because we were looping through it here, weren't we? If we've already got it somewhere, then that's where we want to get it from, instead of going to the database for it. It's easier to get it if I've already got it, right? So we're already looping through self.events data. We have a partner ID and a partner name. These are couple events, marriage and divorce. Well, this is a birth-like event. Do we have a parent? Wish we did. Well, let's just say maybe it's possible to add something to this dictionary and make it a little bit better. However, look down here. We do have, because TreeBart has to create this event, and this is where the event was created by creating this dictionary in a certain way. We do have the child name and the child IDs. We don't have to go through all that rigmarole. We'll look for parents last, and maybe we'll put them in here. So we'll have mother ID, mother name, father ID, father name in here. But let's do that last. Let's do the spouse one first. There's the key. This is the event ID. We already have access to that because that's what we're looping through. We're looping through this. So for event ID, and then here's the value, we want to get partner ID and partner name. It's already got the right name. I already did that getting the right name thing that I told you about. But since this is where we're looping through events data, we're going to have to loop through the values also, and not just the keys, because we're now going to get some values to save in our cell tip attribute. For example, like this. I see a problem already, do you? Whatever, okay. Now at this point, we don't know whether we want a partner ID, a child ID, a mother ID, or a father ID. So that needs to be thought out. I just put partner ID because that's the one we're starting with, but I'm not entirely convinced that we've got everything we need here, because down here, down here is where we have the kin text, where we say partner, and we're going to save it in there. So if this is where we have that, then we need to do this down here, and guess what? We are looping through. We're looping through this. So we do have access to the event ID here. So that's the place to do that, where we have all the stuff that we need. So cancel this up here, get rid of that, and then fortunately we don't have to loop through values here. You see that this is what we're doing last. We're looping through cell pool. What is the event ID? We have access to the event ID in cell pool, but there's nothing in here but widgets and event ID. So we have access to event ID. And then since we know what the event ID is, we go over here and match it up here and get the information out of this dictionary. But this is the one we're looping through. Then we just look up what we need from this one. Now looky here, already got event ID, just need to use it, that's all. So we're in column 0 here, right there. Instead of doing all this indenting here, we could put this as a separate method or a nested function inside of this method, but not really necessary. Let's write it first. So we're going to use the event ID that we have because we're inside of this for loop, the outer for loop. That is our event ID. Is that right? Partner ID, partner name. They don't finish with this house renovation pretty soon, I'm going to move. Okay, but this is conditional. If kintext equals partner, then we want to do this. Otherwise, if kintip is offspring, then we want to do something a little bit different. It should be child for everything in here, right? And otherwise, it's going to be one of those couple event things. This one might be slightly trickier. We've got two here, mother and father. That's left and right, isn't it? We don't have a mother and father, we have a left and right. Now there's more details, especially in this part, because we've got this kin text that goes kind of like, and we probably want to break that up and do something, split it up and make it look pretty, but let's just rough it out for now. I actually believe that this is fairly close to showing up on the screen. So let's make it show up on the screen and see what it looks like. It'll be a bunch of dictionary values, and then we can change that into a proper string. We had previously already created a callback for a hover event, which is called enter. This is a good part. Might as well do the binding here, I suppose. Actually, you want to put the else here and pass, because this is for occupation, residence, etc. Burial, you know, stuff that we don't need a kintip for. And over here, if kintext in, do something slightly repetitive here. Not going to hurt anybody's feelings. And I'm not adding anything to this. That's enough. That's plenty. That's like 4 times more than anybody else does. I don't know if that's true or not, but I thought I'd say it anyway. What I'm getting at is that TreeBard has gone to a lot of trouble to deal with adoption, alt-birth, or birth-like events, really parentage events where you get alternative parents. And I could add one more, it would be kidnapping, but, you know, somebody might think I was joking about kidnapping, and kidnapping isn't funny. Somebody might be offended. We're going to go find out where we had the binding, and then we're going to change the name to something good. We're going to say show kintip. Obligatory event parameter. That widget attribute comes with the event. I think it's time to test this cell.tip. That is a dictionary. We're just going to print that whole dictionary when you point at something. Look at that. It knows the event ID. We got a kintype. What we need is a father and mother's name. We need a left name and a left ID because this is a birth event. Let's go on down to marriage. It's got the right event ID. We're trying to get partner ID and partner name. So let's fix that so that works. We got the kintype. That's correct. We might not know the partner's name or something. If this was wrong, we'd be getting a key error or something like that. I think we're doing the right thing, but are we doing it at the right time? We're binding way up here. It's probable that we don't actually have the right information at the right time over here yet at the time that we point at that thing, but we're not pointing at that thing until all this is already run. Wait a minute. This kintext, here's the problem. This is not kintext. There is a left ID here, but there is no left ID here. We can't run that part yet. These two should be okay though. We don't have a left ID, we don't have a left name. We kind of need to actually add those here, and that is unfortunate, but it's a good idea because we have that here. We have our child name, we have our child ID if it's an offspring event. We have our partner name and our partner ID if it's a marriage, divorce, or other type of couple event. So it just stands to reason if it's a birth-like event, we should have our parent name and parent ID in here too. Let's add that, but first we'll get the kintips running, and then we'll uncomment this and add more information to that big master dictionary that creates the values in the events table. So that's not going to do anything. I mean, we don't have it yet. It should be none for father and mother. That's left ID, left name, etc. Now, if we go down to partner, there you go. Partner ID, partner name. Marriage, that'll work too. Got the right IDs and the right name and ID for the partner. We don't have any events here. We just have a child. In fact, the main reason I created a family element in the database, in the Unigeds, is so that you could say John J. Jones was a partner, because before that, the partner would not appear in this table if they didn't have a child or a couple event with the current person. Now let's look at offspring. Oops, that one's not working yet. Oh, what's going on here? Oh, it's not responding. Something got messed up somewhere. It hardly ever happens with Tkinter. There you go. Child. Kintype child. Child ID, child name. That didn't work. This offspring dictionary is different. This is not offspring. This is the kintip text, and we don't say offspring there, we say child. Okay, so there's no child ID over here in self.events data. So you see over here, we don't have a child ID up here. And then down here, we don't have a partner ID down here. So we're saying if the key exists, you could say it this way. Look what happened. The reason I did that was because it was objecting to the fact that there's no partner ID down here and there's no child ID up here. So we want to go a little further than that. That will prevent an error without me having to sit around and think all day. So for offspring, we now have a child ID and a child name and a kintype. And for the other offspring, we've got a different ID and a different name. For marriage, we've got a partner name and a partner ID. We've got an event ID. We've got a kintype ID. So we're going to make a pretend kintip here instead of printing this stuff. There it is. Now it's missing all that stuff that we put into it. You don't have to grid a top level because it doesn't grid, but you do have to grid everything else. Grid, place, or pack. Grid's my favorite. That is a kintip. Of course, you have to make it go away too. When you go out, we have to take the border off, which is easy to do. One line of code. There's the whole dictionary. We don't want to print the whole dictionary. We want to print the part that we want. We need a name, ID number, and the kintype. Something's still happening on occupation. Nothing should come out there. Something I can do later. Now let's make a proper string to put on that. Let's do a couple event. There it is. And obviously we'll want it over here, and we'll want to take that title bar off, make it some neutral color. Also, you want it to go away when you're finished with it. What happens if you point at a birth-like event? Father, mother, none, none. Here's one way to get rid of the kintip on occupation, residence, etc. Oh, rats, this is so inefficient. This is silly. What you want to do is you want to not bind it in certain cases. You see, this is where we're doing the binding. It doesn't have to be where we do the binding, you know what I mean? We don't have to do this here either. We could do all this in one place. Comment this. Now we want to do this conditionally and not bind it to a hover event if there's not supposed to be a kintip. So depending on what type of event it is. Indented, very much so. Now we're not binding it to occupation and residence. Works for partners. No longer works for these or these. There you go. Didn't finish. Father, mother. Father, mother, father, mother, father, mother. Perfect. Perfect. Nothing. That's what I wanted to see. Offspring, child, child, and child. Perfect. Except on here I don't even want to see a hand. So let's go find hand, and we'll do that here also, conditionally. So we got rid of this whole if. Put all that stuff together that has to do with kintip. None of it's here now. I say this is a good time to remove this, put it in its own method. And magically enough, we're going to lose 1, 2, 3 levels of unwanted indentation by doing that. Plus, this method is now not so huge. Forgot to pass something, 318. Okay, we're going to need column and widget. We're going to move this instead of passing it. We made our own special place for all that code. It's now got its own method, and it still works. Had to pass this, that, and the other thing. The next goal is to get the child name and ID to show up and get rid of this border, title bar, and stuff. There you go. This is a tooltip that I borrowed from Michael Ford. He's a real programmer. We want that. There it is. WM override redirect. Now we're going to actually borrow some of this code here. White letters with the neutral background. Dot. WM override redirect with 1 as the parameter should remove the title bar. It's in the wrong position, but it's got a neutral color now and it has no title bar. Partner 160 George Fred Euclid. The next task is to make them go away when you move your cursor out of there. Okay, so let's make a leave event to complement the enter event. Now, how do we know what's going to be destroyed here? We need a reference to this. Well, there's going to only be one at a time, right? Yep. So we're going to make this an instance variable so we can refer to it from anywhere, like here, for example. Okay, now watch that tooltip as I move my cursor out of the marriage cell. And there's only one. Now, did I tell you before, our kintips were making 2 of each. The first one was not being destroyed because only the second one was being destroyed on leave. Now, did we figure out why? No, we don't care. It was bad code. We threw it out. We did it over. Okay, now this is not finished. I want that to appear down here. So in order to do that, I don't hate the geometry part. I think it's fairly easy, but I think it has something to do with my geometry teacher in high school. I didn't hate him, but I think he hated me. I'm pretty sure he had good reason to. All right, these are Michael Ford's tooltips. And now this is where you tell the top level window, which is being used as a tooltip. This is where you tell it to appear. So we're going to replace override redirect with all this stuff. Okay, we're replacing this. It's still in there. Override redirect is in there someplace. This is not as fancy as Michael Ford's. I'm not bragging. What's this self.widget? Let's look it up, see what it is. That's what you're pointing at. Yeah, because you're positioning your tooltip as a offset of the widget that you're pointing at. So you get in the position of the widget you're pointing at. Pretty sure we want to do that. I wanted to get these all to look similar. I don't know why we're gridding. There's only one in there. Divorce. Look at that, would ya? That is a tooltip. We need some padding around that label. I'm glad I did this first. So much easier. Better, not easier. Yeah, it is easier. It's better because it's easier. I don't suppose they have inner padding on pack. Yep. Let's just make it slightly bigger. Give it a little bit more padding because it might be a little hard to see. There you go. That looks just nice. Now we know which partner is being referred to by this event. George Fred Euclid. That guy right there. The next goal is to get an actual child's name and ID. There's all 3 of them. This is Mila Schreiner's children, 1, 2, 3, with 2 different people. And you say, well, which offspring is that? It's going to tell you that. Kintip is going to tell you. And then after that, we're going to get this to say the parent's ID and the parent's name.